I am here with Adam Clausen. Thank you so much for being on.
Great to be here.
I got your name right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Want to make sure.
Yep.
I mean, no offense, but I can screw that one up like nobody's business. Now, you have one of the most remarkable stories I've ever heard of, and it's so remarkable it seems like fiction when you hear the tagline, 213 years?
213 years.
Sentenced to 213 years, and you're somehow out, or we're recording from a prison. Can you tell us your story?
Absolutely. So it's a pleasure to be here today. As I was saying on the way in, I'm incredibly fortunate. I live with a different sense of appreciation for even the small things than most people will ever know, because I made a lot of mistakes in my youth, as a lot of young men do, only I paid a little bit more dearly for those. So I got wrapped up in the criminal justice system at a very young age. To be honest, the first time I found myself on supervision, got brought home by the police, ended up on probation at 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
Right? So just a kid. And, that coincided with, I vividly recall I had this teacher who was upset at me for, talking too much, whatever I was doing to try and get some attention, being an only child, like growing up in a house where it was just my mother and I, and, single mom who, she did the best she could, and she worked a lot of hours and went back to school. And so I'd get to school and I'm trying to connect with people, and one of these teachers didn't appreciate that. And she, kept telling me to be quiet. And she snapped and said, you're going to end up in prison one day. So the young me, internalized that. The fact that I still vividly recall hearing that today.
Do you think that actually stayed with you that whole time?
It did. Oh, without a doubt. It definitely did. What happened is it became, it was kind of a joke. Kids are like, you're going to go to prison one day. And that sinks in. And me continuously getting in trouble when I was honestly just looking for some additional attention labeled me as a bad kid. That label stuck with me. As a bad kid, I started doing more and more bad things just because I was like, well, what the hell? And that led to me being on probation, 11 years old. And I was taught early on, the police are not your friends. Like, don't talk to those people. And when you hear sirens, you run, right? So that's how I was trained early on. That led to me, despite numerous opportunities in my youth, to get on the right track. I had some people who tried to kind of guide me, some coaches, and had opportunities with sports to where I could have made it out. I was on a scholarship to a high school that was a college prep. Great opportunity, play ball there, go on to college. And that became kind of the plan, but I couldn't stay out of trouble. I was already caught in that cycle. And I was on supervision, right? That never left. But it really escalated when in high school, the FBI shows up. The FBI shows up, and I'm at a private high school, this college prep. They show up in the front office, and they want to look at yearbooks. And the staff up there, secretaries, whomever is in this front office, they don't know what to do. This is the FBI. And this is back in the 90s when the FBI was still very, very well respected. Today, not as much, but back then, stellar reputation. These men in badges show up and say, hey, we want to look at these yearbooks. We might want to talk to one of your students here. The priest who's over this school comes out and says, gentlemen, I'm so-and-so. Do you have a warrant? They look a little startled. This is the FBI. Like, okay. No, we don't have a warrant. We're just, this is informal. We'd like to talk to them. Well, unless you have a warrant, you need to get the hell out of here.
Smart priest.
Yeah. Ran him off the compound. And me, I take this as a win. I'm like, they're looking out for me. That's how I view it in my young mind. Shortly thereafter, I was asked to leave as well. And that sent me on really a downward spiral to where all I had to do was graduate, finish out my senior year. That didn't happen. I dropped out of high school, started drinking, drugs, all of those things to really mask what was going on underneath. many of those unfulfilled needs, things that I was struggling to just, deal with as a young man. And I committed a string of burglaries, a couple of robberies that landed me in the county jail. So instead of going off to college, I go off to prison. I get a 12-year sentence, which was really harsh at, just turned 18 years old. I remember all of the older guys in the county jail. They're like, oh, don't worry about it, kid. You're going to be fine. You're going to get a slap on the wrist. They're never going to give you any real time for this. This is your first offense. And, they wanted to teach me a lesson. So it went a little bit differently. I got the 12 years and there were mandatory minimums. So I had to do 4 years. That was the presumed time. Fortunately, I was able to give some time back, kind of a loophole in the law that got me back into court. So I was able to get out a little bit early, 3.5 years. I got 6 months knocked off. I made my first parole. But honestly, for 3.5 years, what I did was pretty much run around in the yard, played basketball. I got a GED. I can't say I'm proud of that. Like, that's such a low threshold, right? I barely squeezed through high school. I took some vocational training. I got into a carpentry class, and that was kind of the plan. Like, I'll get out, I'll maybe do a little bit of carpentry work for a family friend, figure out how to get back into school, college. It wasn't a solid plan, but it was like, if I can get out the door, then I can figure it out. That's all I need to do. All I need to do is get out of this cell, get out of this prison, right? And I remember thinking that, like, I'm going to figure it out when I get out. Just keep crossing these days off the calendar. Eventually, I'm going to get to my release date and I'll be fine. Like, somehow things will just miraculously be better. So I walk out the door and, this is 3.5 years later, 18 to 21, formative years. My peer group, they're all going off to college or starting, into the workforce, doing different things, moving on with their lives. They moved on. I got left behind. At least that's how I felt, right? So I walk out the door, the one person, you can imagine who was there? Mom. Mom's the one person, right? And although it was difficult for me to see that, we had a very strained relationship at that point. She was there to pick me up. I walked out the prison gate, get in the car, and I'm like, I remember just like breathing this sigh of relief, being like, oh, thank God I made it. I made it to this place. As we're driving away, tears just start streaming down my face. And my mother, gripping the steering wheel, she looks over at me. She goes, what's wrong with you? What I heard was anger, right? What it really was fear, was frustration. My mom didn't know what to do with me. She's looking at me going, I don't know how to handle this. And she was scared. And honestly, I just bottled it back up inside. I said, this is how I've always dealt with it. Bottled it up and, went right back to doing what I had done previously, trying to mask it with the drugs, with the alcohol. And it wasn't a lot at first, but, as these things go, I have a very compulsive personality. And when I was focused on those things, I didn't do just a little, like it was progressively more and more. And as with all things, I get hyper focused and I do things to their end. And in this case, that meant, being pretty far out there. Fortunately, I was able to make it for a couple years. And somehow this whole time I'm on parole. So I'm on supervision. I'm being tested and I'm just like skating through. And I go in this 1 month because I'm on a monthly reporting now. And I'm only a month away, maybe 2 months. Anyways, close to being at the end. I had probably 6 months at this time. So I'm getting close to the end of my supervision. And I'm like crossing these days off thinking, if I can just get to the end of this supervision, I can escape from here. I can leave the state. Remember, first it was to get out of prison. Like, that's going to make everything better. Now I'm like, if I can get off this paper that's holding me here, I can escape to, at the time, I'm thinking maybe Florida. I'll go get a fresh start down there. Because I'm just caught up in the mix and I can't get out of it. I'm caught up in the drug trade. I'm doing a lot of drugs. I'm selling a bunch of drugs. And for people on the outside, my peer group, they look at the life that I'm leading and they're like, wow, that's amazing. I'm in all the clubs, the bars, the restaurants. And for all outward appearances, it looks like a great life. But I was so alone. I was so empty. I was so hollow. I couldn't find whatever it was that I thought I needed to fill that. And I kept searching for it. So in my mind, I said, if I can get off this paper, I'll go down there. I'll start fresh. So it was about counting down the days to get there. Well, I didn't make it. I went in, I reported in this one day. I go in to see my parole officer. And every time I'd go in there, it was like, I'd get within 5 blocks of this building, right? And I'd be like, oh God. And I remember like sweating, the nerves.
It's like, is this going to be the day?
Yeah. Listen, I'm so dirty, right? I'm so dirty. I show up this day. I'll tell you this one. I show up this day and I bring this young lady with me, who I've postponed reporting in because I had a bad feeling. So I've been running around partying with this young lady, and she comes with me, and we're in the outer office with all these other people waiting to get in there. And you have to get buzzed in. It's like bulletproof glass. It's like getting into a prison, right? To go in there and report. And I've done this plenty of times, and I'm taking my jacket and I go, oh my God, I've got drugs in my jacket, right? Like a lot of drugs right here. And I'm like, shit, what am I doing? Like, this is how far out there I am. And I said, okay. I was like, listen, here's my keys. Put that in this pocket. There's drugs in here. I was like, you have my car. I was like, take this jacket. And if I don't come back out, just leave. And she looks at me and her eyes get big and she starts crying. She was like, what do you mean if you don't come out? I was like, there's a possibility that when I go through that door, I might not come back out. And I knew, you know how you just know you have that, like, in the pit of your stomach, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. I know something's off. I know something bad's about to happen. And at this point, there's nothing I can do about it. I got to just see this thing through. So they buzz the door. They call my name. And I go over and I remember walking through, and it's this sea of cubicles. And all these POs are looking at me. And I'm like, am I just being super paranoid right now? It's like, this is playing tricks in my mind. And all the way in the back, there's a secretary pool of assistants. And a group of women who work back there, I'd see them in there often. They'd come into the city, and I had seen them at a particular place a number of times. And they knew whenever they came in, I always made sure they were taken well care of, right?
Okay.
So I walk in this day, and I usually, when I see them, kind of give them a hi and like keep it moving. They all peek over, and I can just see by the look in their eyes, I'm like, no, I'm not being paranoid. Something's up. But I still didn't see it coming. When I turned the corner to go down the hallway to the office, as soon as I turned the corner, it was like SWAT. They jumped on me, threw me up against the wall, patted me down, cuffed me up. And there was no conversation. They're like, no, you're going to jail today, period. And I was like, wait, that's not how this is supposed to work, right? We're not going to talk about this? Nope, you had your chance. Your UA from last month came back. It was dirty. We're taking you to the county jail. I'm like, what about all these multiple chances that I keep hearing about other people getting, right? I'm not getting that chance. He's like, nope, you should have told me. Should have told me you were dirty. I'm like, oh God. They walk me down the hallway, and at the end of the hall, there's this door, and it looks like it's a nondescript door. Looks like one of those interior closet doors, right? Not high quality. There's no deadbolt on it. It's just a regular doorknob. And I always wondered, I wonder what that is at the end of the hall. Well, today was my day to find out, because they opened this door, and 5 feet away is a car running, back door open, caged car, ready to take me right next door to the county jail. And I was like, well, now I know. And here I am. I find myself in the back of the police car, and I'm like, wow, I'm going back to jail. I swore I would never go back. Been out a couple years. I'm being violated. Dirty urine. That's all this is, right? It's not a new crime. But listen, I should be honest, right? I was engaged in all sorts of other criminal activity at the time. This is just what caught up with me and put me in the county jail. And between my parole officer and the judge, they decide they're going to teach me a lesson. They sit me down for 90 days. 90 days in Camden County Jail. This is the 90s, late 90s. Camden's like Beirut, right? I mean, it's third world country at this point. And they think that putting me in here is like gonna, I don't know, scare me straight. I walk in, these are guys that I know. I've been in the prison system. I've been in the streets. I have a reputation, which serves me well in these circumstances. So I walk in and it's like, hey, not what they were expecting when they sent me there. So for 90 days, here I am counting the days down, crossing them off on a calendar. Like, I just got to walk it down. I got to get out the door. I got to get out the door. I got to get out the door. And everything in me is saying, just run, run, run. Like, that's just my instinct at this point, right? 90 days later, sure enough, I get the call. You're out of here. Grab my bedroll. I'm out the door. So during that 90 days, I realized how fragile my whole existence was. When you're living on the fringes, you know, especially, you know, illegal enterprise lifestyle, I just didn't have anything that I was connected to. I didn't have any legitimate bank accounts. You know, I had stuff stored in a safe. So during this 90 days, my car that was out front, the young woman who was with me did not go back and get it.
Wow.
Yes. The car was left there. It got towed, impounded, repossessed. My phone got turned off. My house got sold out from underneath me. All of my possessions miraculously disappeared. You know, guys were looking out for me. And I had a bunch of money on the street that if I wanted to go get it, I had to go collect it. That's what I walked out to. And I walk out, and even the clothes that I was wearing at that time, somehow the jail lost those, right? They're like, well, we don't have any of your personal possessions. I had nothing. So I walk out the door. This is on the East Coast, right? January.
Oh, geez.
I'm in flip-flops, these bus pants like scrubs you would see hospital workers wearing, and a T-shirt. And one more thing. I had a bill for the cost of my incarceration, because back then they were charging you per day. You had to pay for your own incarceration on this violation, right? So I walk out with a bill, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Soon as I hit the street, I literally took off running. And I get up to the McDonald's, and I have to ask a woman who's working at McDonald's, I was like, can I have some change? Like, payphone, right? They still had payphones back then. Can I borrow this payphone? Like, can I get some change to make a call? And I call up a guy. It's a guy that I did time with in the state. And he's all too eager to like come pick me up. He's like, I got you. I'll be right there. Comes, picks me up. And, you know, in that state of desperation, I'm like, I've got money on the street. I've got nothing. Like the realization hits me like, guys did not look out for my stuff. Like, what am I going to do? I don't have a phone. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. Like, this is serious. And my mother's back in the Midwest, so I'm the only one. It's not like I have family here. I have nobody here. So what am I going to do? And over the course of the next 3 weeks, I committed a string of robberies, 9 in total, 9 that I was charged with. There were other ones too, but 9 that I was charged with. And when they finally catch up with us, I have a co-defendant who, the same guy that came and picked me up that day, says, man, I'm not going back to prison. I'll tell you whatever you need to know, and immediately starts talking to these detectives. So what would have been a local matter, serious, definitely serious, right? Suddenly gets escalated with a phone call to the FBI. FBI, DEA, ATF, everybody's involved, right? Because now we're talking about links to organized crime, major drug trafficking case. Anybody that knows anything about our criminal justice system, a drug conspiracy is the easiest thing for the government to prove. And basically, it's just you being in proximity. If they say, you know, we can put you here at this place and time with these people, you were doing something with drugs? Yes. If I say yes, well, that's enough. That's a conspiracy right there. Yeah, we were plotting to do whatever with, you know, moving these drugs, selling these drugs, whatever that looks like. That's what they wanted us to say. The problem is that co-defendant wasn't the person in proximity. So he pointed them to me and some of my other co-defendants. That got them interested. They didn't really investigate. They were really just excited. They're like, oh, we got a lead here. And they had been after these guys for quite some time. So they brought us in. They charged us in federal court. And, they start reading us all the charges. And they're like, you're facing hundreds of years. I'm like, I've been through this before. I know the game. You can't really give me hundreds of years. Like, that's not possible. So I listened and, I just kind of laughed, played along. And, I knew right then, I knew things were serious. I knew I was in some trouble. I just didn't know how bad it was. When I ended up getting back and getting on to one of the housing units where I get a chance to look at the books, because we're being held without bail at this point, right? And I start looking in these law books, and what they're talking about with these mandatory minimums for the use of a firearm, not for the crimes, right? Like the robbery by itself, they're like, that's whatever. The fact that you had a gun, we have this other statute that allows us to then charge consecutive sentences so they stack one on top of the other. And I'm reading this in the law books. I'm like, holy shit, this is real. I was like, I've never heard of this. Like, how do I not even know about this? And, that's what they proceeded with. The government thought that they were going to be able to leverage those sentences.
For what?
To get us to cooperate.
Okay.
To have me say, yes, we were involved in drug trafficking with those organized crime figures. I had an attorney, my attorney who was representing me at the time. When I told him, I was like, first and foremost, you should know that I'm never going to say that. That's not going to happen. I said, second, the crazy thing is they have to know that's not even true. He said, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. You just need to say that. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. He goes, well, then I can't help you. And I'm like, wow, this guy came through a referral. I was like, when your cousin finds out that you're pushing this to happen, I was like, you're going to have a problem. But you guys will have to deal with that. I was like, you and I are done. That ended that relationship, and I went through a number of other attorneys who, anybody out there who knows how our criminal justice system works, the public defenders are highly overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. And when you get into the federal system, the federal government has a 97% conviction rate. That's the reality. Nobody wants to fight them. Our whole system is completely reliant on people taking plea bargains. What that also means is, in order to get a plea bargain, the majority, if not all of those, it's such a small percentage, the majority of them are cooperating. What does that mean? That means when you cooperate with the government, they want to know everything that you ever did, everything you know about any person in your life who might have done something illegal. That's how cases are built, right? It's not like what we saw on TV decades ago about, good detective work. We're going to go out and we're going to track down and find the facts of this crime. No, it's about bringing people in, putting pressure on them, getting them to talk about other people, and then you go and get those people and get them to talk. And it's just he said, she said.
Just a big domino.
That's all it is.
Knock one over, knock the next over.
And it's everyone. I mean, just think about the repercussions of that. Not only is that a flawed sense of justice, because there's no real justice in that, but think about how that's eroding like relationships, entire communities. Like there's zero trust, and there's never going to be trust. Like to rebuild from that is very difficult.
But also they were asking you to potentially lie.
Oh,
so then the question becomes like, so if this is continually knocking down to the next person, how many people are falsely convicted based off of what evidence they want rather than what they actually have?
You would be amazed at how widely accepted it is for individuals who are admittedly involved in criminal activity to simply agree to sign a deal to say that they committed certain crimes that weren't even the crimes that they committed, just to get through the system and get out of it because they were involved in other stuff. They're like, well, they didn't get me for this. They want me to say I did this. I'm just going to go along with it and keep this thing moving. And that's how our justice system operates. Yeah. You know, it's a little bit different now. We've seen so much of this play out through our national media, through a distorted lens, no less, right? But we've had high-profile figures like the president himself who have gone through the legal process, and I would hope that people have seen enough to seriously question how our justice system operates, enough to where when the FBI shows up, they don't just take their word, whatever they're saying. They understand that, listen, these are not all honest people. I'm not saying every agent's a bad agent. It's like everything, right? There's plenty of people in law enforcement that, you know, join law enforcement for the right reasons, noble cause, you know, they have high character, but there are those others. And because of their position of power, they have an overwhelming negative influence because of that authority that comes with their position. So, you know, that's the case. And in my early years, I just had some bad luck, right? Because I came in contact with some of those law enforcement people who were not people that should have been in those roles. And looking back as an adult, I say, man, like how different things could have gone had someone intervened, whether it was, you know, a strong male role model or whether it was one of those law enforcement people who said, you know what, like this is not what this young man needs. Like we just need to get him on the right path. Somebody needs to, you know, be a little bit more forceful in getting him back on track.
So I've got a huge list of questions. However, as this narrative goes on, we have to get to the punchlines.
Yes.
Or I can't pull out the lessons learned, right? So they obviously convict you.
Yep.
213 years. And the big question mark is, how are you sitting across the table from me?
Whew. Okay. So getting sentenced to 213 years. Difficult to even comprehend what that must feel like, right? As you can imagine, it wasn't, everyone asked, what was it like when that sentence came down? It wasn't the sentence. It was the day that my jury came back and convicted me. Because of those mandatory minimums, I knew when the foreperson said on count number 9, why count number 9? Count number 9 was the third firearm offense. So for the first one, count number 3, I got 5 years. For each additional firearm, because there were 8 more, it was an automatic 25 years.
Oh, jeez.
So I knew after that second one, 25 and 5, that's a minimum 30. Once you get to the next one, game over. Because now we're at 55 years. My life is over, right? So I heard that and I'm like, meh. I just tuned out the rest. I'm like, okay. And immediately my mind is thinking, so what's next? What's the next move here? So I was already thinking about, okay, you know, appeals, what's the process look like? How do I keep fighting this thing? That's how I'm wired. Like, it was never like, my life is over, I got to just give up. No, it was like, okay, like, where's the next fight? And I credit that to my youth just being highly competitive, sports, like tradition of winning on certain teams. Like, you don't ever give up. You know, that was the other thing that was ingrained in me early on. Like, I just had no quit. And this was a similar situation. But fast forward, I end up in a United States penitentiary. That's where I get sent to. I'm a young man with 213 years, a repeat violent offender with a history that follows me. So again, I come into those environments and I'm welcomed, right? I'm seen as a good guy. So where a lot of people are, you know, afraid of, oh my God, what was it like coming to a, you know, maximum security penitentiary like that? For me, it was like guys were waiting for me. They knew who I was. They knew why I was there. Immediately, do you want a drink? You want something to smoke? Here's a knife. Like, wow. What do you need? Here's some commissary, some clothes. Welcome. It's like, welcome home. You're here. And for me, I was like, okay, let's go. And I wasn't ready to give up all of those negative habits because I was still masking a lot of that. I wasn't quite ready to deal with the underlying issues. I was still running, right? Even though I was running in place at this point, it's like, I got to just keep pushing. I got an appeal. Like, give me a date, something to focus on. Here's my attention. I'm going all in. Go as hard as you can. 2005, 5 years in, my final appeal comes back. Supreme Court says denied. For those who don't know, because everybody watches, these court dramas on TV. Oh, we'll file another appeal and we'll get you back in court. That's not how it works, especially not in the federal system. You get one direct line of appeals. For me, that last appeal came back where the Supreme Court said, end of the road, and it was very unceremonious. I got it during regular mail call where they hand out the mail. They gave me, boop, I go, wow, from the Supreme Court. Let me take this up to my cell. Let me go look at this. Because I was anticipating a response. I was hoping for something a little bit more than this. I rip it open. I pull it out. It's a single page in bold. The only word I see is denied. That was it. That was the end of the road for me. My proverbial fork in the road. And if I'm being honest about it, in that moment, I lost it a little bit. I literally kicked in my locker. I kind of snapped out. And after, I got that out of my system, right back to that reset, like, okay, now what? What's next? My proverbial fork in the road was right there. What are you going to do with this? And there had already been some early influences, some seeds that had been planted, where I knew that I had to look inward and figure out what was going on with me. I had to get that part right. And if I was ever going to get a second chance, if someone else was going to put their name on me to vouch for me, I'd have to do some pretty significant things. I would have to become someone else, and I would have to have a lengthy list of accomplishments that person or persons could look to and go, look at everything he's done. Whether that was a college degree or something else of significance in my mind, I knew that was the path that I needed to take. And I made a conscious decision right then and there. I said, well, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to choose to double down. I'm going to focus. I'm going to go hard like I've always done. And part of that, like my constructive outlet, was in the gym. I was in the gym physically hitting it hard every day. And that allowed me to feel like I was actually physically doing something that was somehow building, allowing me to grow towards what it was that I ultimately wanted. And that was my eventual release.
So I did a little research on you before you got here, and I understand that you were teaching inmates in the gym. Like, yep. They were just sending them to you, and you were kind of the guy in that. How do they go from like 200-year plus sentence to, we should trust that guy, let's send him, he's going to be a role model, that guy? Like, where's that transition? I guess here's what I'm asking.
Yep.
Is right here in this narrative is a moment of tremendous change. And I'm very curious how you create change in a person. And maybe it was forced upon you, and maybe that's the answer. But there's something happens right here. And while everyone's curious about how you got out, that's actually not that interesting to me. I'm really curious how does that moment occur where everything shifts?
One of the things that I vividly recall from those early days of working out was finding myself in the gym, face down on the floor, like to the point of exhaustion. I could not get another rep. I was glued to the floor. Like I had pushed myself that hard. And that's something that I don't think many people are able to tap into, that, like push themselves to that physical extreme. Like people think that they push themselves and like, oh God, I've had enough. I can't take anymore. No, like I've been able to push myself physically. But in doing that, I also knew that I was cultivating mental fortitude within that process. And by being in that gym every day, I watched myself get stronger. I watched the results of my effort, and I knew that if I just kept investing, that it was gonna benefit me in the long run. Others took note of that. And again, I said I'm a bit of an extremist, right? So when I go all in on something, it's not, I wasn't just showing up in the gym today and going, okay, what are we doing today? No, I was getting every book, that I could get my hands on. We still had VHS tapes, if you can believe it or not, back then, on, physiology, anatomy, human kinetics, all of these things I had an opportunity to learn about, and was just hungry for more knowledge because I saw it as a means to be able to grow smarter, to grow stronger. And it was a forced routine. It was a routine that was forced upon me, right? Because you're in prison, you move in circles. But I did get to choose where I invested my time and energy. And I found that thing that I was so passionate about, where I'm like, why? How could I have not found this earlier? How come I didn't, know about this, being involved in sports, that like fitness could be something that I could really pour all my energy into? But I did that then, and others saw the results. They saw how passionate I was, and they sought me out for it. They're like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I see you transforming yourself. Share your secrets with me. Like, I want to know how you did what you did. And that became my sense of purpose, right? Like, sharing this knowledge base. And also, like, it was something that for the first time in my life, I felt like I'm making a positive contribution.
But it sounds like you weren't seeking leadership. You were just trying to like ruminate on one thing, and people saw that and said, we want that too.
Yes.
So it wasn't about, I'm going to become the leader of men. It was just, I'm going to push myself as hard as I can.
Very true. I mean, I've always had an innate ability to lead, but I had kind of pushed it off. I'm very much an introvert, content to be by myself. But as you pointed out, like, others were attracted. They wanted this knowledge. I felt good about giving it. And although it was outside of my comfort zone, I just kind of grew into it. And I enjoyed the results so much that I said, you know what? I'm just going to keep doing this. And that grew into me leading classes. And it changed my identity. Like, from the guy who walked in through that door that they were ready to give a drink, give a smoke, give a knife to, suddenly when someone came in and they were like, nah, man, like, I want to get fit. They're like, well, go see Adam. That became my identity, the fitness guru. And I felt good about that for the first time in my life. And once I, really got a good ways down that path, I said, you know what, this is where I need to be. And I'm just going to keep going in this direction, knowing that the more people that I help, like, that's going to come back to me at some point. But I still didn't have there was no end plan. I wasn't sure where I was going or how I was actually going to get out at that point.
There's these two pieces of literature that tug at me at this moment in the story. One is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which lines up perfectly with what you're discussing, right? You're talking about like, hey, I decided to have some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose to get me through some really difficult stuff that I'm going through. So on one hand, you have that. On the other hand, you have the infamous quote, you become the average of the people you surround yourself with. And you're not really surrounded by necessarily the greatest people, or at least from a society's standpoint, that might be the case, right? So I'm curious how you kind of isolate from look, our recidivism rate in the country is terrible, right? We don't seem to actually get people to not go back to prison. We're really good at almost using prisons as training grounds for creating lifelong criminals. And you're an exception to this rule. Why are you an exception to this rule? Was it because the guys that wanted to improve themselves surrounded themselves around you? And sorry, I'm answering your question for you. Is that it?
That's a great hypothesis. Yes, that's it. So interesting that you bring up those two things. First one is Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Read it when I was in the hole, 9/11. So that was early on. Woke up drunk, hungover, in the hole on 9/11. Most people remember where they were that morning. I had a chance to read Frankl while I was in there. I thought my suffering was bad comparatively to what he went through. I'm like, wow, this really puts it in perspective. But the ultimate takeaway there was not what my suffering was in comparison, but how I had the opportunity to use that experience to envision how it was going to impact me, to take those experiences and allow it to shape my future, the future that I envisioned for myself. And I said, like, I can take all of this, learn from it, and use it to make sure that others don't repeat my mistakes, that they don't end up caught up in this cycle like I was from such an early age. You can break that cycle. And that ties into the second part, is getting around other guys that I saw who were doing things differently. And despite the common misconception that everyone in prison is generally unintelligent, destined just to end up back in prison. Like, you have people that make the same mistakes over and over. Most people in life do that. I mean, look at, we have a obesity epidemic. Like, people continuously make bad health decisions. This is similar, especially when you bring drugs, alcohol, substances into it. But our prisons are filled with some truly extraordinary people. That first prison that I was in, we had some of our country's most dangerous and highly intelligent. We had cryptographers on staff that went through all of our mail because we had the spies there. One example is Aldrich James, famous Russian spy, traded our secrets to the Russians. Brilliant CIA guy who, unfortunately, was an agent for the Russians, but still truly brilliant. He and others like him, in that environment, yes, they were dangerous. Everybody who was there was very dangerous. But there was also an opportunity to learn things from them. And I saw that opportunity, and when I could, took advantage of it. Saw the positive things that I could learn from people. I saw different ways that people were living. And I wanted to make note because I certainly saw plenty of the bad examples, or what can happen to someone after an extended period of time in prison, the mental health effects. And I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything that I could to ensure that that didn't happen to me. So I was fortunate there. When I left that environment and got down to a medium security facility where there were people who were closer to the door, who were going home, who were there for lesser offenses, I would say generally there was a different focus. There were guys who were really focused on improving themselves, getting, higher education. And although initially I was very comfortable in my space, I had carved out this space in health, wellness, fitness, and people came to me. So that became my comfort zone. I had a couple individuals who are still some of my closest friends to this day, pulled me out of that sphere into one that was more focused on higher ed through a partnership with the University of Pittsburgh. Had a mentor, Dr. Tony Gaskew, head of the Criminal Justice Department, came in, exposed me to different opportunities at higher ed to not only learn, but to facilitate, to serve as an adjunct professor within his classes of criminal justice students. Totally changed my perception of myself, on whether or not I was smart. Because that teacher who told me I'd end up in prison one day, those words still rung in the back of my mind with another message attached, like, you're not smart. You don't belong in these spaces. And all these years later, that professor helped to undo that, allowed me the space and the opportunity to realize, like, I do belong here. I am intelligent, and I have the ability to continue learning, to continue growing. And he gave me the space to do that.
You're a father now.
I am.
So you've mentioned these like little moments that became seminal in changing your trajectory. Are
Yes.
you terrified or very cautious at minimum of how you interact with your kids?
No. By design, very intentional. Every day, everything I do with my son, how we talk, how I explain things, like there will never, and listen, none of that would be possible without my wife. She and I are totally on the same page. And I remember as a child being told, well, just because, it's because. like as an answer, as an absolute, as an adult could tell you, like, I don't need to give you an answer. It's because I said so. And my wife and I are very, very intentional on explaining things to my son and reinforcing the positive and making sure he knows that he's loved, that he has all the support that he needs, like to an extreme. And, you know, you have to find that balance between just because I love him doesn't mean I will do everything for him. Like when he's complaining about putting his shoes on or getting dressed, I'm like, no, you're 3.5 years old. Like you can do these things on your own. You do not need me to help. I've seen you do it. I need you to know that you are capable of doing these things. So that's the other side of it, right? Like
you can't make it too easy.
You can't.
In the same way that you're at the gym laying on the floor trying to recover, like you've got to go through hardship.
You do.
In order to get stronger.
Yep. So those are the lessons that I bring. You know, it's from the perspective I've seen both sides. You know, I've seen the harm that can be done. I know after doing, you know, a ton of introspective work, me identifying that ultimately what drove so many of my bad decisions was a need to be loved and to have that sense of belonging. Once that was satisfied, and here's the crazy thing, I got that satisfied in prison.
How so?
Through my wife being my chief support and through my peer network, the men who were closest to me that helped me build a community in prison. I mean, that's extraordinary in itself that happens within that environment. But all of us made a commitment to ourselves and to one another to fully invest in this process of becoming a better version. We were given the tools, life coach training, other, you know, supports, and a small environment where we were able to try on new ways of being. And that was the key to my personal transformation, to really starting to live into my full potential, because it was that group support and accountability. Like if I said I was going to do something, I knew I've got people around me. They heard me say it. I said it out loud.
You have nowhere to run.
I got to do it. I live in a fishbowl, right? Like I can't duck anybody. And it worked both ways, right? Everybody knew too. Like if they told me, oh, I want to get fit, I'm going to eat healthy. We're in the chow hall. Like I'm watching guys walk through the line. I was like, are you going to get the apple or are you going to get the piece of cake?
Do you get a bunch of selection as far as food is concerned?
No, not really. Like that's like your one choice, right? Do you want an apple, which nobody picks the apple, or do you want the slice of, you know, cake, sheet cake? And most everybody is like, I need to treat myself. But yeah, that was that level of support and accountability in that environment was exactly what I needed at that time. And I think for all of us, it helped to amplify our growth. You know, talk about post-traumatic growth.
Post-traumatic, I've never even heard of that.
No.
I've heard of post-traumatic syndrome, but I've never heard of post-traumatic growth.
Yeah, is a real clinical term. People who come out of extended periods of trauma, once they are stabilized, they go through these spurts of just like enhanced learning where they can absorb things. And I went through a couple of those early on. I had an experience with it. That first time that I was in prison as a child, 18 years old, and it was brief and I didn't know how to channel it. And then the second time through, where I went through some periods where like I read a textbook, and again, I'm seeing myself as not being very intelligent, and somehow I was just absorbing. I can't do that today, believe me. But for a period I could, and it was truly extraordinary. Then reading about that and understanding some of the science, what we know about neuroscience now, like there's so many more insights into how our brains work, how trauma affects us, but also how we can heal. Neural pathways can be restored, right? And habits, practices, and patterns, we can form new neural networks to increase or enhance our abilities and focus on those things that we really do want. So being caught in that negative loop, you can slide that track over and start to etch a new loop, a new habit loop, cue, routine, reward, that gets deeper and deeper with practice. And now all of a sudden you're in these good habits and you start to, develop a record of that. If you can do that in prison, right? Then when you walk out the door, you are far better prepared for the challenges that you are going to face. Because as I had thought early on, that like just crossing the days off, I get out the door and somehow things miraculously get better. That's not how it works. You're in a new environment with a whole new set of challenges. You're back to square one. You got to figure it out. And if you're not equipped to deal with that, you're going to go back to what you know. Under times of great duress, we revert back. And if we haven't addressed what that, underlying behavior is, we end up doing the same things over and over again and, filled with regret. So
I've got another podcast on the tail end of this one, and I'm super frustrated because I feel like I've got like 3 hours of questions for you. Yeah. For the listeners, we have to land the plane on how you got out. So we should just get that out of the way so that I can just start rapid firing things at you. So,
Let's do it.
So your lawyer writes up a petition?
My lawyer is actually at the White House advocating for sentencing reform. 2018 landmark criminal justice reform. First Step Act gets passed. Like, against all odds, people are like, President Trump is never going to get it done. He got it done. Thank God he got it done. It gets passed. Those mandatory minimums that I told you about get repealed. Problem is they're not made retroactive. What does that mean? It means everyone who's already sentenced does not get the benefit. That makes 0 sense, but that's how it works. So technically that didn't help, but there was another amendment in there called compassionate release. My attorney is one of the people who helped ensure that that little clause was written in there. Over the next 2 years, he tried cases all around the country, built up a record in all of these different circuits. He and other attorneys who promoted this compassionate release as a vehicle to get individuals back into court to allow a judge to finally have a chance to review some of these sentences that previously there was no way to get somebody back into court. That's basically the short answer. Eventually, after I'm watching people get relief for 2 years, my wife and I are like, okay, bud, like, Sean, you got to file this thing, man. He files it, and my case is not an easy case. I'm a repeat violent offender who spent the majority of my life in prison, basically all of my adult years, right? Who wants to give me a second chance? Fortunately, this is during COVID. My attorney goes in there, argues on my behalf, and I should note the reason why he is such an effective advocate is because he's been in federal prison.
Oh.
He's a former federal bank robber who served 12 years in federal prison.
Oh.
Got out, went to law school, became a very successful criminal justice or criminal defense attorney, gets recruited by Georgetown Law, becomes a law professor, has President Trump's daughter, Tiffany Trump, in his class, becomes her mentor, becomes a frequent guest of the White House in writing the criminal justice reform bill, and then going around arguing these cases on compassionate release, which was written into the bill, to basically form the foundation for the day that my case finally gets back in front of a judge where he's able to open it, look at it, and acting as my attorney, stands there as my advocate and says he could be the one standing here today.
Wow.
That's powerful, right? There is no
It's
other
pretty poetic.
attorney on this planet that I would put my life in his hands. Sean Hopwood did it. He's a dear friend. I would not be here without him. And without the amazing support I've had from so many other people.
I mean, that turns the mirror right back onto you, right? So he did this incredible thing after that. And now the responsibility, like, hey, you're out. And here's this boulder on your back of what are you going to do about it now? Because all the other releases just turned right back around. You've got a whole different level of responsibility.
Yes.
With that being said, okay, 2 things. Can I have you back in here?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
I've got a lot more I want to talk to you about. But
Yeah, you got to ask me about my wife at some
I
point.
know I haven't even gotten there.
Yeah.
Haven't even gotten there. Not even close to enough time. What was I thinking with an hour? What did you decide to do with yourself? Like, you get out. What's your responsibility to society, to the world, to yourself after that point?
Oof. Responsibility to the world. So it's not the responsibility that I feel to the world. It's the responsibility that I feel to the men that I left behind. It's like guys who go off to war together. There's like a survivor's guilt for those who come back and those who don't. So when that law changed, there was about 3,500 of us who were excluded because it wasn't made retroactive. And I was one of only a handful who made it out through a door that is now closed.
Oh, they got rid of it?
It's been closed. The courts have not been honoring the law. So currently, I am beating on the door to the White House, to those tight circles within criminal justice reform that are, again, looking to basically advance many of those reforms. The responsibility that I feel is not only to those men to advocate for them, but to serve as a model of what happens when you do give people second chances. So every day I live with that weight of responsibility. Like everything I do, people look at me as what the potential is, the good, and if there's anything bad, so I'm still living under the same microscope that I lived under for 20 years in there, because I knew anything bad that I did in there would ultimately take that slight opportunity that I would have someday to maybe get some relief. Now that I've gotten it, now it's everyone else, right? Like their slight chance for getting relief now weighs on my shoulders. So that's something I carry with me every day. And I get the phone calls. My phone rings every day with somebody from federal prison who wants to know, one, they want to hear the good stuff that I'm doing because they're looking for inspiration, but they also want to know, hey, like, do I have a shot here? Are you doing what you can to make sure that I get my day in court, that I get a chance to get out? Man, that's a lot.
It's tremendous. How can people find you and connect with you?
Easy. Adam213 is free on Instagram. My wife and I have a podcast that's on hiatus right now, Gritability. But we're very much focused on bringing that back here shortly. Love highlighting not only our stories of success, but others. We need to amplify those voices, those stories, because people don't get to hear the good, right? The media wants to sensationalize all the negative stuff that they see out there, but there's a lot of amazing people, especially who come out of our criminal justice system, who are doing amazing things all across this country. So yeah, come check that out on Gritability, and yeah, that's it.
And there will be a part 2.
Absolutely.
I got a lot. Here's a piece of paper that has not been referenced once yet. So thank you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. But I really want to dive deep into the psychology and all of that, and we're going to do that on part 2.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Sophia.
That was great.
You're